Hello again everybody, and welcome to the second video in the hand feeding instructional series. In this video, we will be talking all about the brooders. The last video on the preparation for the parents to feed for a breeding season was mostly theory, but this video will concentrate more on technical aspects. The equipment you will need, the setup, and the operation. First, what is a brooder? Basically, it is a contraption that simulates the conditions inside the nest as closely as possible. It is where the babies are kept warm and safe for the 6 or so weeks that they are in hand feeding. From the time they are pulled from the nest to the time that they can be moved into a grow-up cage. It is a safe, dark, and warm place where the perfect temperature and humidity can be achieved and strictly maintained. It should be easy to use, easy to clean, and energy efficient. The four main aspects are 1. The container, 2. The heat source, 3. The humidity source, 4. Measurement and regulation of heat and humidity, and 5. Insulation. In this video, I will be showing you exactly how I built and use my current brooder setup, as well as talking about some lower cost alternatives that you could use and their potential drawbacks. I'll also go a little into what to avoid, as there are so many posts and videos out there that advertise how to make a brooder for little or no cost, using whatever you can find around the home. These posts often give out the dangerous advice, as their purpose is not really to inform, but just to gain clicks and viewings. The setup I have here did not really cost that much to construct. It works very well, and is the end result of about a dozen rebuilds and reworkings. I have had this exact setup working continuously here for about 8 years, only changing the materials I use for insulation to test out new products. Before going into brooder construction, I'll answer the most commonly asked question: why not just buy a commercially available brooder? Well, I did buy several of these, new and used, and I've wasted quite a bit of money on them over the years. For the most part, they are made of plastic and have a lot of moving parts that can wear out or break. These parts are often specific to the brooder and must be purchased through special order, resulting in downtime. They also often use quite a bit of energy, as you can have big glass or plastic door panels. While these door panels do give a good view of the babies inside, they do allow a lot of heat transfer, and the light coming in keeps the babies awake and nervous. There are some very nice brooders out there with stainless steel construction that look a lot like a very large microwave oven, but they are very expensive, can be very technical to use, and replacement parts can be hard to source. And the more complicated something is in construction or design, the harder it is to clean. But the biggest problem I found using all these brooders is that the doors open to the front. This spilled wood shavings all over the place, and with eager and active babies, taking just one baby out, or one clutch, and keeping the others inside was very difficult. Open the door, and I had a whole mini flock trying to get out. And trying to put them back in and get the door closed when all they wanted to do was to play, it was a battle. Just do a search for parrot brooder in Google, and you will see what I mean. It is much easier to have a brooder that you access from the top. But if you have a couple of $1,000s to drop on a brooder, by all means. I do admit that they are a lot prettier to look at than what I have here. So, number 1 for construction, working first things first. The brooder container. Here I use a simple glass fish aquarium, 5 or 10 gallons depending on your needs. Not too large, as it will be hard to keep warm, and not too small, or it will be crowded and hard to keep from overheating. A glass aquarium is very easy to clean and to disinfect, and should last pretty much forever. They're also not expensive, and considering their durability, they are a great value for the money. Cheaper alternatives could include things like plastic picnic coolers, plastic Rubbermaid tubs or similar containers of a similar size, but great care must be taken. Plastic is just not as good as glass in this kind of situation. If you add heat to anything plastic, it could melt or give off toxic fumes. Plastic is also harder to clean and to disinfect, and it can hold odors and stains. Now for things that should never be used. Cardboard boxes or paper bags on a heat pad for the internet famous paper bag brooder. Now, the reasons here are simple. Heat and humidity and paper products should not be mixed. Fire hazard number one. You will eventually get either a fire or bacterial growth. A cardboard box could be used for babies over 6 or 7 weeks of age when a higher temperature is not needed. But even then, just a little bit of poop soaking into the cardboard can be hazardous. The second part of any container is, of course, the lid. Here I use a reptile tank lid, made for the aquariums I purchased, and I got them at the same store. It is a simple powder-coated metal mesh lid that lifts up out of the way. It is important to use a metal lid, as this is the part of the brooder that will come into direct contact with the heat source. Not recommended is keeping the top open. You just will not be able to keep any kind of heat in the brooder. The heat source would be running at all times and could bake anything underneath it. Also not recommended is to close it off completely, as when using a picnic cooler. There always has to be some air ventilation and air movement. For obvious reasons, the babies do need to breathe. Of course, you'll also need some kind of substrate on the bottom of the brooder, something to keep the babies off the hard glass and to absorb the waste. Here I use white wood shavings. Very inexpensive and easy to use and to dispose of. It is natural, absorbs waste very well, is antimicrobial, and simulates closely the plant matter used in the nest by the parents. It can be purchased in large bales at most feed and pet stores, but some people do like to use paper towels. But this can get expensive as it has to be changed out very often. It also does not provide as much soft padding as wood chips, unless you are willing to use several layers. For new babies, I will often use both. A single layer of paper towel over a layer of wood chips. This allows me to monitor the condition of a baby's poop and to keep things extra clean in the first few days while immunities develop. Never use any paper products such as shredded paper or even newspaper, as they do promote bacterial growth and can have harmful chemicals. Kitty litter, sand, crushed shells, or anything artificial should never be used, or anything that can be harmful for the baby if it is swallowed. Now for the second topic, number 2, the heat source. Here I use the ZooMed Nano double heat lamps with a ceramic heat emitter bulb in one side and an infrared bulb in the other. The ceramic bulb is good for heating the air, and the infrared bulb is good for heating the objects inside the brooder. The infrared heat bulbs are also useful to enable you to see inside the brooder, a little light source, and the red color of the light will not really have an adverse effect on the baby's sleep. Having 2 heat sources is important, because if one goes out in the middle of the night, there is another there as backup to keep the babies warm, at least until they're checked up on in the morning. This heat lamp setup is easy to use and easy to fasten to the wire mesh lid. Just make sure that the method used allows for easy access to replace bulbs. Here I use unlocking zip ties. Everything about the brooder construction should take convenience into account. It is something that you will be interacting with often when hand feeding a collection of babies. There are many lower cost alternative heat lamps out there from pet or feed stores, and they work just fine most of the time. Just make sure that you have one that fits on the lid without overlapping and can use a heat bulb that is dimmable. There are many heat sources that others recommend that should never really be used. Heat pads made for people cannot be regulated well. Usually they only have 3 settings, and these days they all come up with an auto-off feature. Under tank heating mats, coils, or strips meant for reptiles or fish are more expensive than heat lamps, and they will get so hot trying to heat up the air in the brooder that they will often melt the insulation used and burn the baby bird's feet. They are just not meant for this type of situation. Also not recommended are your basic table lamps, or anything else that is meant to hold a regular light bulb. A heating bulb in something like this is just too hazardous. They are not built to handle high, continuous heat. The second fire hazard warning. And the third topic, humidity. You want the humidity in your brooders to be somewhere between 35 to 60%. You do not really have to be too precise with this. There is no one magic number. But below 35%, and the babies could develop some skin irritation and run the risk of dehydration. Above 60%, on the other hand, and you run into problems with mold, mildew, and accelerated bacterial growth. I have seen quite a few gadgets that you can put into a brooder to increase the humidity. These are all expensive, mostly made out of plastic, and are hard to clean. The simplest solution would, of course, be a dish or bowl of water put into the brooder, but you do not want spilled water or wet and chilled babies. By far, the easiest solution is to use damp towels. Tea towels, dish towels, hand towels. You can get them in bulk off of Amazon for a few bucks. I soak them in warm water, wring them out, and put them on top of the brooder on the wire mesh tank lid. Just make sure to wring them out enough so that they won't drip. Evaporation from the towels will increase humidity, and it is easy to regulate by changing the amount of times each day that the towels are replaced. I find that changing them here once in the morning and once in the evening keeps me at a good humidity level, although that does change depending on the ambient humidity in the room. Every day or two, I just throw the old used towels into the wash basket and use new towels. Make sure that the damp towels are placed far enough away from any heating element, along with anything else that could melt or catch fire. The third fire hazard warning. The fourth topic is heat regulation and measurement. For this, you will need a thermostat. This is what the heat lamp plugs into, the device that turns the heat lamps on or off to maintain a steady temperature. I have tried several different makes as they are easy to find online and in stores. But the best to use, and what I have had in use here for close to a decade without a single breakdown, are the Exoterra 600-watt thermostats. Found at the local pet store, mainly meant for reptile use. They're not the cheapest, and a 600-watt rating is admittedly a bit overkill, but they do have one important feature that the others do not. They are a dimming thermostat, which means that they are not just full on or off, but feed through just enough power to keep the brooders at a steady temperature. This prevents the high or low temperature swings that you would get with a cheaper thermostat. This unit has a temperature probe that sits inside the brooder and is tough enough to endure any chewing. The heat lamps plug into a power bar with a breaker, and this power bar plugs directly into the thermostat. One important thing is to always have a backup thermostat ready to go just in case. But for this purpose, a cheaper basic one off Amazon will do. Of course, you'll also need to be able to monitor temperature and humidity. And for this, pretty much any dual sensor will do. They are inexpensive enough to have one in each brooder as backup. There are ones purpose-made for reptile enclosures, and that do work well. Ones with wired probes that are placed inside the brooder, and ones with wireless probes or monitors that connect with a little display. Whichever ones you choose, just make sure that they are accurate by comparing the readings to each other and to the readings on your thermostat. You can find many different kinds in pet stores, big box stores, and of course off Amazon. As long as they are accurate, you can use whichever one you like looking at the most. I do prefer the ones with the wireless sensors, as I can have several displays, and this allows me to monitor brooder conditions from all over the house. You can even get ones that will allow you to monitor results from your smartphone. You want to be able to keep the heat in the brooders, both to save on electrical costs and on equipment life. And this will also prevent any wild temperature swings. Insulation is placed around, beneath, and maybe even on top. Just leave enough room for clearance around the heating elements and for adequate ventilation. Repeat of fire warning number 3. I have used 2 types here with great success, rigid foam insulation and foil bubble wrap. Rigid foam has the advantages of providing a stable structure and higher insulation value, with the downsides of it being more porous, making it harder to clean, and the difficulty in measuring and cutting parts. Foil bubble wrap, used here, has the advantage of being easy to cut and use, easy to clean, but with a lower insulation value, even when using several layers. And the next time I take the brooders apart for a deep clean, I will most likely rebuild using both a rigid insulation frame covered in one layer of the foil bubble wrap and sealed off with aluminum foil tape. There are other insulations available on the market, such as spray foam and fiber batting used in housing, but these would not work well in this situation for obvious reasons. Cheaper solutions, such as using cardboard, newspaper, or towels, would not give you the insulation rating that you would need. They might be fine to finish off a 6 or 7 week old baby, but not as a long-term solution. Now that we have all the parts of the brooder set up, it is time to get it working. The tank and lid are in place with insulation surrounding it. The heat lamps are fastened to the lid. The substrate is in. The heat lamps are plugged into the thermostats, and all temperature probes are in place. I find that a setting of 31 degrees Celsius works best for me here. You will know if your temperature is too high if your babies are spread out pancake style and panting. And you will know if they are too cold if they are shivering and shaking. You will have to keep a close eye on your babies, as different brooders in different rooms will have to be set up with slightly different temperatures. Many breeders also change the temperature of their brooders week to week as the babies get a little older, eventually going down to room temperature just before the babies start weaning and are moved into a grow-up cage. Now, I usually wait until there are feathers on the wings before lowering the temperature down to about 29 degrees Celsius. And wait until there is almost a full mantle of feathers before lowering it again to 27 degrees Celsius. Of course, my nursery here, the room itself, is usually between 24 to 26 degrees Celsius with all the heat sources being present. So going any lower would be impossible. The brooders should be set up and set to the proper temperature for at least a few days before adding any babies. This will give you enough time to test everything out and make sure that you're able to maintain a steady temperature and humidity level over time. Make sure the brooders are set up in an area of your home away from any drafts from windows or opening doors, and in a room with a stable temperature and out of direct sunlight. Monitor the thermometers and humidimeters frequently throughout the day and night, making small adjustments as needed. Just know that when you do eventually add the babies, you'll have to adjust everything again and do so on an ongoing basis. The little babies themselves are a heat source, and of course their poop will act as a source of humidity. Food goes in and poop does come out. Now, once in use, make sure to completely change out the substrate you're using at least once or twice a day. If you are using paper towels, do so before or after each feeding. Continuously check to make sure the babies are not panting or shivering and that there is adequate ventilation. You want enough air movement so that there are no bad smells inside the brooder and that not too much humidity is building up. Now, for how long to use the brooder. Some people like to remove the babies from the brooder at about 5 to 6 weeks of age, just when enough feathers have come in to allow them to thermally regulate themselves. I usually keep my babies in the brooder until 6 to 6.5 weeks of age, until a full mantle of feathers is almost grown. Wing feathers will be nice and long, and only a few patches of downy fluff remains under the wings. You will know for sure that a baby is ready to come out when they begin to walk and climb around during a hand feeding, and making their first attempts at flight. If you open up a brooder and a baby flies out, you know they are ready. And once these brooders are set to the correct temperature, they require very little to keep them going at conditions optimal for the babies. They are much more inexpensive than commercial brooders, and I find them much easier to use, clean, and maintain. When building your own brooder, experimentation can always be done. Just remember that the primary goal is to keep the birds safe, warm, and clean. You're wanting to replicate as closely as possible the dark and cozy environment of the nest. Now, I did not go into all the aspects and all the details on brooder building and use, otherwise this video would be several hours long. But with the information here, a person will be able to build, set up, and use a brooder to raise many successful clutches. And if anybody has any questions or would like to know more about a certain aspect, let me know in the comments. And of course, any encouragement would be greatly appreciated. The next video in this series will be on the hand feeding station, the equipment needed, and the process of hand feeding itself. See you all then. And now for me, it's time to have a little more cuddle time with some of the babies.